I
Yes,
forgot to
Beth.
introduce somebody
Oh, okay.
as in their position. I introduced them as parliamentarian, but I forgot to introduce Debbie Jensen as a past governor.
Okay.
My little check didn't make it on the list, so I apologize.
Okay. Okay, sorry. I'm not gonna start over. I'm gonna go back to where I was. Um, or at least I'm gonna try to go back to where I was. Okay. All right, we're good. Okay. What is courage? Courage is the choice and willingness to confront fear, pain, danger, or intimidation for a worthy goal. And when you focus on a worthy goal, you can overcome many fears. Fear of failure, fear of making a mistake, fear of upsetting someone, or something we've all experienced, just fear of losing club members because we haven't adequately addressed issues in our clubs. I think we can all agree that fear can paralyze us and keep us from moving forward. And as you know by now, you should know by now, my theme for this biennium is keep moving forward. So my goal is for us to be equipped to do this. Okay, all of us have no doubt worked with many bright, well-educated, thoughtful, and successful leaders in our careers and in our time with Sir Optimist. And most of these are good, honorable people and leaders. We're going to talk this morning about the river of fear. So this is the river that cuts across all organizations. And this graphic can help us visualize and understand. And we'll be talking quite a bit about this. So on the left side of the river, this is what we're going to call the safe bank. And many leaders, most leaders actually sort of stay over here. Most leadership actions and decisions can be carried out in a reasonable and fair way. And it's easy to stay here when everything's going well. If you can think of a really bad leader in your experience, it's probably their fear that has kept them actually probably not on this page at all and nowhere near the.
You muted yourself.
Did I mute myself? Okay, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
You're good. Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry. So I want to be clear. When we're talking about leaders here over here on the left bank, this safe bank, we're talking about really good leaders, just not great ones. And on the other side of the river, we have crisis, pettiness, anger, jealousy, regrets, disrespect, and all other kinds of bad behavior. And hold on one second, because
Judi, is there a way to make your voice louder?
louder. I can talk louder about that. Okay, so if we stay in the safety zone over here on the left, we never have to deal with crises, anger, jealousness, etc. But if we do deal with those things and we get to the other side, we have effectiveness, we have outcomes, we have engagement, contentment, happiness, joy, etc. So it's worth trying to make that journey across the river, right? So to be most effective, that's where we need to be. And the thing that stops us is fear, which is why this is called the river of fear. And to get there, we need courage, commitment, and character. And I'm going to throw in another important value that's not on here because it doesn't start with the letter C, and that's integrity. So I'd like to take a few minutes, if you can, and I can't see you, so Penny's going to coordinate this. Name some of your fears, and we're all learning, so don't be afraid. And I will start by telling you that one of my fears is loss, losing a friendship or losing an important relationship. So who else has a fear that they are willing to share?
Fear of speaking in public, which is hard. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's always way up there on people's list of fears, that and death. And I think public speaking actually ranks above death, if that tells you anything. So anyone else?
Fear of failure.
Fear
I
of
was just
failure
gonna
and
say that. Hmm.
fear of failure in what ways? What kind of failure?
Say you suggest something for an event and it doesn't work.
Right, right.
I mean,
We've all made suggestions, I'm sure, in our meetings where people just kind of look at you like you're nuts, and then they move on, and you just kind of sit there going, I thought it was a good idea, but
yeah, yeah.
Carrie, I think your hand is up, or else you're agreeing, one or the other.
Both. I have a fear of rejection.
Mm.
And that kind of goes with the fear of failure. Like you have a great
Yeah.
idea and somebody goes, nah.
Right. And I've recently read something about fear of that feeling of rejection. And it's like, twist your mind to say, this is not the place I should be or need to be, or there's something better for me out there. And so that helps me sometimes when, you hear people got together or something like that and you weren't included. And I was like, well, there was a reason why I wasn't there for some reason. So that kind of helps a little bit. But so I've obviously struggled with that as well. There's lots of hands up. Tammy?
Fear of not being good enough.
Yeah, that's a really strong one. And let's see. Carla?
Fear of conflict.
Fear of conflict. Good one that you said that, because we're going to be dealing with that in the future. So stay tuned. Debbie?
Actually, as a people pleaser, fear of people not liking me.
Mm.
And rejection, yeah.
Yeah, rejection. It's one of those. So Irene?
The fear of not being able to accomplish more together due to the conflict.
That's a really strong one. So we all want to achieve things for our mission, obviously, and sometimes it just doesn't happen because people focus on the little things as opposed to the big picture, and that look at what we have achieved as opposed to looking what went wrong. Again, a lot of this is mindset on how are you perceiving this and how are you helping other people to perceive it. So, we've had not failures, but fundraisers that didn't make as much as we wanted or not as many applicants. And instead of celebrating what we were able to do, people look at that negatively. So we as leaders, you're all here because you're a leader and you want to improve, really need to work on helping people change that perception of what we're actually accomplishing out in our communities. So Donna, did you already speak, or did I already call on you? Your hands up.
No, I
Okay.
was just going to say fear of not being able to fix things.
True. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes the fix is to let it go. So, or let the number go, or
Yeah,
let the project go. But yes, that's a really strong one as well.
that's the hard thing is to know when to let go, and because then you
maybe
go
we can-
into all that fear of failure and fear of this and fear of that. It just kind of
Right. And that also includes feelings of rejection, feelings of losing friendship, all of that, because that's really strong. So we'll definitely make a note of that, and Judi and I will make sure we address that in the future ones as well. So I think that's Tana. I think you're the last hand that I see.
Chaos. I like things orderly. So I do. I think sometimes I try to overcompensate with I don't want to use the word perfection, but order, because I don't like the chaos, and that's just a fear of mine.
Right. And that's a strong one. A lot of times people that are in charge of projects will try to have order, and then some people perceive it as, oh my gosh, this is so chaotic. And the truth is we have to be able to adapt as well. So we can plan to the very last number, but we're so optimists, and sometimes we make it up as we go. Our focus is on the mission, and as long as we try to bring everyone along in a positive manner, then there's a little bit of chaos that can be accepted. But you're exactly right. You can't pull off big projects when it's just all chaotic. There's got to be a plan and being able to adapt as well. So Cheryl, let's have you be the last one. Or Cheryl and then Tammy, and then we'll be done. I think you're muted, Cheryl.
I had a member, I was always afraid that if I said the wrong thing, she would quit. And she was really instrumental in calling our big event. And ultimately, she quit anyway.
Right. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. Again, it's the fear of rejection, the fear of losing a friend, that type of thing. But everybody's opinion has to be respected. And if you're afraid of saying something to a member because they may quit or whatever, that's not really your problem. It's a conversation that needs to happen with that person to say you have to accept other opinions as well and still be okay with that. And that's a tough conversation, which we'll address in the future as well. And Tammy, would you like to do the last?
No, that was an accident.
That was it? Okay. Well, I guess we're back to you then, Judi.
All right, thank you. And I will say those are all perfectly valid. Anyone's fear is valid. You can't
Right.
invalidate someone's fear, right? And some of us experience these infrequently, and some of us experience a lot of what you named all the time. And it's normal. It's perfectly normal to have fear. What's difficult is the ability to face our fear. And if you're being honest, let me ask you this. How often do you see leaders challenge wrong behaviors and take risks for principles or for people? It's actually fairly infrequent. And the reason is because it's hard. But the good news is we can do this. We can cross the river, we can get there, we can face our fears, and that is going to be the focus of this year's Leadership Academy. And let me tell you this, great leadership qualities are internal, and we can't expect other people to do what we're not willing to do ourselves. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I'm having like weird things going on here. Okay. Fear begins in our gut. It's an instinctive reaction to the unknown. And sometimes we rely on fear to keep us out of trouble. Like if you're being chased by a bear, for example. This isn't probably the best time to have courage unless you're super confident in your ability to ward off a bear attack. But sometimes fear can be disproportionate to the risk, and we allow it to spread into our relationships and our organizations. And when not challenged, our fear can make us prisoners of our weaknesses. And it helps us, or it kind of forces us to keep on the lookout for the next thing wrong in an attempt to justify our fear and our inaction by saying, see, something bad happened. One way to manage our fear as it pertains to our emotions and feelings is simply to ignore it. So if we ignore the thing that scares us, we never have to face it, and then we stay safe. Or do we? This might actually feel like a healthier choice in the short term, but what happens when we don't deal with conflict? It doesn't feel good. And it can cause us to be angry. It can cause us to be anxious, irritable. And eventually it'll cause us to withdraw from social situations and maybe even leave our own clubs. Unresolved conflict causes members to be less engaged, and other members will leave clubs as well. Does this resonate with you? I think it does, because I heard even in this last conversation, fear of losing a club member. Many of you have heard me tell this story before, and I'll share it again because some of you are new. But I was a member of a club that disbanded due to unresolved conflicts. These had built up over time. And guess what? It didn't get better on its own. The problems didn't just go away. And staying silent just made everything worse. By the time there was an attempt to address the conflict, half of our club members had already left or had decided to leave, and it was too late. And I can tell you, our club president was an incredible, amazing woman that everyone liked and adored. She was a very accomplished and very capable leader in many ways. but she didn't have the courage at the right time. She waited too long. And so what she was afraid of happening by confronting the conflict, which would be people leaving the club, is what actually happened because she didn't speak up. So we're going to come back to you again, just quickly. You named some of your fears. Some of you mentioned things specific to Seroptimus, but I want to ask again, what fears do you have specifically as it relates to Seroptimus in your clubs?
Can you repeat that, please?
What fears do you have as it specifically relates to Seroptimus?
And Donna has her hand up.
So I think it's kind of a fear and excitement at the same time, but not knowing how to get there. And that is bringing the two generations together.
That's fantastic. Our future is in our younger members, less experienced members. It's just math, I guess, is what you would call it, and aging. So yes, that's a huge deal. So we will definitely have that on our list for future. And Debbie?
I fear my club that there's just a lack of interest in the Seroptimus mission. It's like people just join to do an event, and it's like when we have meeting like this leadership meeting. I don't know. I think there's only two of us on. We just can't seem to get them interested in anything other than our local club, and it's very frustrating to me.
Right. And a lot of times it's people unaware of what's happening. When you play around on our SIA website there, and even the Seroptimus International website, there is so much information that can be shared with members that may generate a little bit of excitement. I know a lot of members are interested in the UN connection or the used to be President's Appeal. Now it's the foundation. So you might even try to assign somebody to bring in some of the things that you see online. Either you see other clubs doing things on Facebook and just bring up some additional ideas. The good thing, I think, is SIA has started the acceleration program, and now the Lifter program, which I don't think that's been presented yet. It's coming up though. But those are ways that people can still feel like they're part of Seroptimus, but maybe adapt programs that they love from the past that didn't really fit into Live Your Dream and Dream It Be It. So I think we're making some inroads with the Federation on trying to be more inclusive of what makes people interested in serving under the Seroptimus umbrella. So I think a little more education, we used to call it SALT, with the leadership training and just the overall ideas from other people. So it's not just the little community that's sharing ideas that you've heard year after year after year, but infusing some other ideas as well. Sorry, I went off on my soapbox.
No, I was just going to ask, so Debbie, can I just ask, like, what is the fear associated with that? Is it just kind of fear of apathy and not your club not growing, or?
Yeah, I think it's how do I put this in words? It's pretty much just focused on the club. It's not wanting to know more about Seroptimus. And like you said, the UN, and I mean, they would have to attend conferences and other district meetings and things to learn all that. It just doesn't seem to be a motivation for them to do that. And I don't, Julie and I talk about everything we do and how fun, exciting it is and what we've learned. And there's just a few people that participate, and I don't know why. They just can't get them going.
Okay.
And I do fear that it's not going to be good for our club in the long run. Yeah.
Okay.
And Beth, what would you like to add?
For me, bringing people or welcoming new members in, but I'm the only one who does it, and other people are not including, and the clicks kind of stay the same. So those are all issues that I've seen and fears that I have, because I want us to grow and get more diverse in all sorts of ways. And it just, I feel like I'm always pushing on that. So.
Those are good points, and it comes back to the growth of the club and the involvement. If you're fresh in Seroptimus, or if you're doing things the old way, and the fear of actually losing your club, quite frankly. So, Chris.
I think fear of time commitment is a really big one in my club, and tying into what Debbie was saying as well. They want to work only the local, but yet their time commitment is not there. So I think that's a really big fear, because it does hinder a lot of the activities that people want to get involved with. And therefore you have those leadership issues because, I can't do that board position because it's going to take too much time.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And District Director 3, I can't read your whole name, just your title. So sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine. It's Amory. Thank you.
Amory. Okay.
No, it's my turn to go. My fear for my club is repeated behavior. We do a really good job at being proactive and having workshops and discussion, and we've gotten over the courage part, I think, pretty good. But you can only do so much. So for those bad behaviors to be repeated, I guess, is a fear of mine.
That's a really good point as well. Thank you for that. And I was just going to add a couple that are from the chat. So the fear of commitment to Seroptimus as a whole, which is what we've talked about a little bit. And then from a newer member, that they're not good enough in regards to Seroptimus, that they don't know their ideas and strengths, how they can apply it to their club. So that goes back to how well are we integrating our new members and identifying what their interests are, and kind of plugging them into areas where they'll be successful and celebrated for their skills. We just recently did online. I steal everything from online, but there was a list of hobbies. It had everything from acting to, I don't know, bird watching. And we had all of our members mark everything that showed them interest. And we had several of them say they like acting. And so now we're developing a murder mystery with our own members being the actors. So if you don't ask people what they're interested in and try to plug their interests into your club, then that's where some of the staleness goes. And that's just a brand new idea that we were like, whoa, who would have thought that would have worked? we came up with a fundraiser and a social and all that mixed together. So last one, Cheryl. Cheryl, can you unmute yourself? I think.
Mine's a kind of strange, I guess, related to types of members. We only have regular members now until life members are phased out. But what I observe is many clubs that have large membership, but they're members that don't participate. They don't come to meetings. They might send in a check or show up at an event that catches their attention, but they're not at meetings. So, when you come to voting for things, you only have a very tiny, tiny number of members that are present.
Right. And we all have those. I mean, let's be honest, we all like when people just send us checks as well. You can't give away money, but the preference would be every member feels that Seroptimus is a priority in their life, and we have to find the ways that can make that happen. And sometimes it's not going to happen. People like our mission and want to support it, but they just don't have time to participate. So we have to respect that as well. But again, just finding out what's important to people so that Seroptimus becomes a priority in their life. That's actually a struggle that we all have. And it could fall into the whole fear category again of losing your club or losing interest in the club. So thank you again for all those comments, and back to you, Judi.
Okay. All right, we're going to go back in history for a few minutes. And if you could tell by the slide, we're going to go pretty far back. So our earliest ancestors, for them, courage was kind of a way of life. It wasn't about greed or selfishness because they needed courage to survive. So if you think about, living in the elements and not having homes like we have today, or fighting off all kinds of creatures that we didn't know anything about, or even as simple as learning to communicate. So it was courage that linked learning, communication, and teamwork to social advantage to allow them to progress. So using courage, our ancestors could subordinate their egos for the good of the clan. So long before the invention of a legal organization or structure as we know it today, we were hardwired to show courage, regardless of the risk to ourselves, because it was for the greater good. Okay, we've clearly come a long way, but even though our communication and technology has evolved immensely, our generation still has the need for courage, right? Somehow it seems harder now. I'm not sure why. I can't actually say that for sure. I didn't live in the cave people times, but I'm assuming that we have just as much struggle, because it seems like the more we advance, the more opportunities we have to turn and hide, or simply to run in the other direction altogether. So I am curious, just very quickly, what thoughts might you have on why it's harder to be courageous today than it was for our ancestors a long, long, long time ago?
Carrie, would you like to share?
Sure. From my impression, it's because of there are more people paying attention to what you do. So all of your fear of rejection is because of social media and the way everything is public now. There's just more people paying attention. And because they're paying attention to you, they're paying attention to other people. And so there's a risk. If you have a fear of being judged, that plays into it too, because you don't want to be compared to somebody else. You don't want to look at somebody's Pinterest board and see a better birthday cake. You want to just do your own birthday cake.
Right. Well, you hit a hot topic for sure about everything is online. Everybody knows everything about everybody. Everybody judges the safety behind their keyboard. And yeah, it's really courageous to put through on Facebook or Instagram or any of the social media your own opinion on things. Because sometimes you put something on there that you think is just basic, and boy, you get attacked or supported, whatever. So yeah, that's a really great. It's almost preferable for me to just be able to talk face to face with people instead of only communicating through text and Facebook and everything else. It's got its advantages, but it's all about communication, which is one of our topics coming up. So it's a great point. Anyone? Oh, Irene?
I just think over time, there's also been differences and changes in leadership styles. So with that, not that any different leadership style is wrong or incorrect. There's just sometimes when there's different leaders that are trying to lead in a different way, it's having that fear of maybe offending them, there's that top down, and then there's the other leadership that incorporates everybody. So there's just that in differences. And so sometimes trying to relate and try to lead and be on the same page, I'm sure that's also something that's progressed. So
right. It's especially what's it called? Positional leadership, where you used to be able to just say, because I said so and I'm your boss, doesn't work anymore. And it's the same thing in a club. You have to be able to adapt in your leadership styles as well. But that's a really great point. Thanks for pointing that out. And last one, Gail.
Hi. I think I'm on. Okay. There's also, it's hard to be courageous when you think that you've got people all agreeing to something and then they're talking about it outside saying, she said, oh, this didn't work. Oh, blah, blah, blah. It never comes to you or to the person that they're talking about. You hear it third or fourth hand. It's painful.
It is, and that is one of our coming up topics is communication. How to communicate, have the courage to speak directly to the person that can make the change. I mean, we can talk all day on sidebars, but can those people actually make the change, or is it the president or a board member that needs to be spoken to help with that? So that's a great one as well, Gail. Thank you. Back to you, Judi.
That was a perfect setup. So thank you all. We've clearly experienced changes in the way we communicate with the emergence of technology, right? So you've all heard of hiding behind an email or a text. You've likely been on the wrong side of an email or text, or maybe you've even been one to send an email or a text that could have been a little bit nicer. I have in the past, always regret it. And to Penny's point, like we all know the importance of body language, right? So how do you use body language when you're not communicating in person? It's really hard. So we use emojis maybe, but I think we could probably all agree that a smiley face emoji isn't quite the same as a genuine in-person smile, which goes a long way. And we all have heard horror stories of using technology anonymously, right? So there's cyberbullying and all kinds of things that go on because we have the ability to communicate with other people who don't even know who we are. And to me, that's the exact opposite of courage, is attacking someone anonymously. And is there really a difference between cyberbullying, for example, and talking about someone behind their back, like Gail was just referring to? And to me, it's very similar. Okay. So here's what we know. 3 things are for certain, and we're going to go into detail on these. 1, you and your clubs will face points of decision. We're going to talk about what that means. The power of courageous behaviors are well known. And finally, you will need courage to cross the river. So again, the goal of the Academy this year is going to be to equip you to cross the river. So points of decision are exactly when courageous behavior is needed. And it's proven time and time again to be the only thing that can really help. And when we master the skills that allow us to act courageously, we can be confident, we can be bold, and we can translate that into action. So before we go into a lot of detail on points of decision, I'm going to ask again, what might you think of as a point of decision in your clubs? I'll give a couple examples to get the conversation going. And we've mentioned this before. Someone threatens to quit the club. And that's a point of decision because, I've seen clubs react both ways. First, let them go. Second, we have to do anything and everything we can to keep this person. So it becomes a decision that the club has to make on how they're going to handle that situation. That's one example. Another example, and then I'll let you see what you come up with. Someone resigns from a leadership position in your club, and now you have a position to fill. What other examples do you have?
Donna, would you like to share?
Yeah, so I think points of decision are, and a lot of it might have to do with the mission. I mean, everybody understands the mission, but it's which way some of the members want to deal with the mission. Do we want to move ahead like a shark? Or are we comfortable in what we've always done? And so members have to make decisions on which way they want to go. And sometimes I think you forget about what's best for the club as a whole, for our community, for the women and girls that we're serving. So
That's a really good point, Donna. And if you remember, if you've been around for a while, we used to have 8 or 9 different focuses that you could pick from to do work on. And then we came to the dream programs, which are a really great idea in a lot of ways. And then were a little stifling in a lot of ways. And now we've opened it up again for the acceleration and the Uplift Her program. And I'm speaking about Uplifter, not actually knowing much about what it is, but I'm anticipating that it's going to be really positive. So yeah, the mission direction and the support of our members for the mission direction can make or break a club, that's for sure. And so it is a little anxiety driven to try to figure out which direction your club is going to go and still fit within that mission. So anyone else have any points of decision that cause them a little bit of fear or anxiety?
I do. This is Tana. I lost my raised hand. It is making the decision of what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior.
That's great. And I think SIA came out with, a lot of clubs have their own code of conduct, and I think SIA is formalizing or updating theirs. So that should be coming out pretty quick if it's not already now. But yeah, what's acceptable behavior? I think we all have some nightmare stories about things that happened at spring conference or, fall meetings when we all got together. And it's difficult for behavior to step forward and correct someone's behavior. That's something that's causes some fear and anxiety with leaders. But if you don't do that, then other people who are offended are just going to walk away because they don't think they're being supported. And it's in a quiet manner, which is unfortunate. So anyone else have any points of decision that they'd like to share? Nope. And just so you know, there's a link on our chat now to register for Uplifter, which is the meeting on September 10th. So while you're listening, because I know you can do more than one thing, you can click on that link and register during this meeting. Okay.
All right, I'm going to throw out a few more points of decision. So how about this? What if someone that is known not to be a good leader wants to take on a key leadership role? I've had clubs where that's happened. What if a new member leaves the club because they didn't feel welcome? Or what if a club is misrepresenting the club out in the community? Or a club member acting outside of their level of authority, or a club member undermining a board decision? Those are all things that can happen and do happen that put us in a point, I call it a point of decision, because you have to decide how to move forward. Do you let it go? Do you deal with the dissension right then and there? And it's these points when these sorts of things happen that it really tests us, right? Okay, so I'm sure you can all think of leaders that you've known in your past that are able to move past their doubt and hesitation and demonstrate courage. You've probably also known leaders who had this opportunity, faced a point of decision, and didn't make the right choice. So the good news for all of us is if we feel shy, if we're afraid of conflict or confrontation, we can learn, we can build our courage, and we can get better. I'll be the first to say, I hate confrontation as much as anyone. And I'm on this journey to learn alongside all of you. And the good news is I know we can do it. I know we can learn, and I know we can get better. Because, courageous leaders that we know started just like us, hesitant. People start in a position of being, in your leadership journey, can be a good leader. You can be very honest. You cannot cheat, but you can also be unable to repair conflicts. You can be completely honest and not lie and be transparent. But at the same time, you can tolerate gossip and you can avoid dialogue with people that are bullying or offensive. Because under pressure, good people like us, refuse to face their fears and do the right thing to stand up for other people. If we silently choose inaction and we tolerate unacceptable behavior, it has long-term destructive consequences. And if you're being honest, how many of us have had initial reaction of just hoping a problem will go away on its own? And maybe we wait till there's a repeated behavior before we begin to think maybe we should address it. So we just discussed points of decision and gave some examples. And these are the key points that test our core values. And even though we know we need to be prepared for these as leaders, most of us aren't. So if you're in a leadership position in your club, we ask you, did you accept the position believing everything was going to be great? Or did you accept the position knowing there was some looming issue that you were going to need to address? And how many clubs have had someone not step into a leadership role because they knew there was an issue and they didn't want to deal with it? So a courageous leader will accept an assignment even when they know there's something out there, some crisis they're going to need to address. Many good, honorable people, our friends, will refuse an assignment because they don't want to deal with it. It's easy to resist repairing bad habits. It's easy to resist upsetting the status quo. And despite us knowing that change is inevitable and we need it to survive and grow, we still have a tendency to resist change, especially when we know or expect that others will also be resistant to the change. Okay, courage is not something you're born with. Every individual, regardless of age, gender, size, education, has access to courage. So many of you have probably seen this photo before. It's one of my favorites. It's a little kitty. He sees his reflection and he sees a lion. He thinks he's a lion because he has courage. He thinks he's bigger than he is. And because he thinks he's a lion, he's not as afraid as he probably should be. Facing fear, acting for what is right, correcting wrongs in yourself, addressing problems, these are all things that can be developed and strengthened, and it takes practice. It is a learned quality. How often do we have opportunities to be courageous? And what percentage of the time do we take advantage of those opportunities? Okay, just for a little fun, this is my kitty. This is Winston McCufflepuff, my orange kitty. And ironically, I found this picture on my phone. He is conquering the fear. Okay, that was just for fun. Okay. Principled conduct under pressure is a simple concept. It has two working parts. So one, establishment of high core values, and two, courageous behaviors that align with those values. So when organizations fail or clubs fail, through all of the smoke and mirrors excuses, we can look at points of decision and we can see where we failed to make the right choices. But if we face these points of decision with courage, commitment, and character, we can emerge through the crisis, and it doesn't hurt to stay calm. Okay. Has anyone learned in school how to have courage? How to develop it personally, or how to develop it within your organization or your club? You know, we may have been told when we were young by our parents to stand up to bullies, but did they tell us how? So we looked at, thousands of years ago when our ancestors worked their way through all kinds of species-threatening hazards, but we don't really talk about it so much today. Somewhere along the way, we kind of stopped talking about character in our families, our schools, our institutions, whatever. We accidentally just sort of stopped thinking about it. We started treating observations of scholars like Aristotle, Confucius, others, as just academic, right? Instead of things that we really can use to define the quality of our lives. We live as if we no longer need wisdom. Now, let me be clear, this is a generalization, but society as a whole no longer seems to focus on character. I think if we look at the news today and we see the comments that people make and how they act out, there's definitely an absence of character. But I want each of you to have the gift of courage. I want you to remember that courage is a choice. It's the choice and willingness to confront fear, to confront pain, danger for a worthy goal. And whether you choose to embrace it is up to you. But as individuals and collectively as seroptimists, we need to experience the benefits of courage for ourselves and, more importantly, for the women and girls that we serve, because I think we can all agree that that is a worthy goal. Someone in the waiting room. So now we're going to talk about core values. So we've just said that principled conduct under pressure is based on the establishment of high core values and courageous behavior that aligns with those values. So you may have noticed I threw an additional word in there, which is high core values, as opposed to just core values. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. So where do we get our core values? I mean, for most of us, they're formed from experiences when we were children, adolescents, young adults, and now in our professional lives, or through various roles that we play as a parent, as a child, as a sibling, as a boss, as a subordinate, as a club member. All of those things help form our core values. But it's very important that as leaders and as organizations that we can identify, name, and know our actual core values, because these are the things that drive results and effectiveness and outcomes. And when we know our values, we can predict our behaviors, we can predict our outcomes, particularly in times of crisis or stress. Okay. These are the stated core values of Seroptimists International of the Americas. So I'm just going to read through these quickly. As an organization, SIA, we value gender equality, women and girls living free from discrimination. We value empowerment, women and girls free to act in their own best interest. We value education, women and girls deserving to lead full and productive lives through access to education. And we value diversity and fellowship, which is women like us from varied backgrounds and perspectives working together to improve the lives of women and girls. I want you to keep these in mind, so we're going to come back to them. But first, we're going to do an exercise around our individual core values. You've likely done an exercise like this before, but bear with me because we're going to take this a step further than probably what you have in the past. Okay. Look at this list, and I want you to take a moment on your own, not to say out loud, whether any of these values listed here resonate with you. Okay, your first reaction is that they're probably very negative. Well, let me explain. These are probably not things that you aspire to be, but more things you might actually do when you're not thinking about it too hard. And I want you to be completely honest with yourself. Do we ever find ourselves doing or acting in any of these ways? I'm just going to give you a minute to think about it. I think it's kind of scary if we find ourselves on this list. Well, let me explain. These are what we consider low core values. So they're more like habits than things we aspire to, right? No one wants to admit that they follow any of these. They're just bad practices. They keep us way, way, way away from the river. These sorts of things can seek spirits, kill morale, and ultimately cause organizations to fail. but they also emerge from our basic human instincts. And in some cases, like productivity results, they can produce early short-term results, but they're not sustainable. I can tell you, because a couple of things on here jump out at me in terms of where I am in my career. And one of those is productivity. I spent a lot of time in my career focusing on productivity. Many of you know, most of my background is in the healthcare setting, and in healthcare and hospitals in particular. Staffing levels relative to, number of patients is actually written in California law. So there's requirements, and on the hospital side, we talk about productivity, which is how many people does it take to do a thing, right? In one hospital I worked at, our chief nursing officer, he prided himself on being a productivity machine. He was extremely proud of his productivity results, but he took it to an extreme. And in an effort to master productivity and make sure there was never a wasted moment, he forgot about individual needs, individual competencies, where people were comfortable working and who they were comfortable working with. And a result, we lost a ton of nurses along the way, which, as you know, is not a good thing. So it was used to an extreme. Let me just ask you this, and you can just raise your hands. You don't have to say anything. Have you seen any of these things on display in your clubs? And have you ever lost club members because any of these things were on display? I can't see your hands, but I know you're all raising your hands. Or perhaps you've left an organization because the organization couldn't rise above these low core values. I know that I have. I've left organizations that were too focused on results, for example, and forgot about people. I've left organizations where people were disrespected, or there's backstabbing and gossip. This sounds very familiar to what I know is happening in many of our clubs. Okay, we're going to move to the next list. So I would like you to take a moment to actually write down anything on this list that is important to you. And I'll give you a couple minutes. Okay, these are what we would consider middle core values. They're good. These are very good values. They're admirable, they're desirable, but they're also the product of high core values, which we're going to get to in a minute. So I want to ask you, can any of these values on this list be used in a negative way? Can you think of how any of these could be used not for the good?
Beth, you have your hand up?
I've seen places that are so customer focused that they don't pay attention to their own members or staff, and to the detriment of the people that are in the office all the time.
Thank you. And Chris?
Honesty is it depends on how it's delivered, right? How the message is delivered. If you're going to be honest in a straightforward manner without cushioning it, the impact a little bit, it can be very a negative outcome.
Right. And that goes along with communication. You kind of have to know the member that you're talking with or the friend that you're talking with about how to respond. in a proper way where it'll be accepted the way that you intend it to be. So good point. Donna?
Loyalty. I think sometimes, we try and be loyal to some, which may not always be the best because we think we're doing the right thing by being loyal to that person. Maybe we've known them for years and years and years, but maybe we're not being loyal to the person that's, trying to make a change, the person that we really want to go along with them and we agree with them, but we're trying to be loyal to the other person, but it's not for the betterment of the entire group.
Right. That's a good point as well. Joanne? Oh, you're muted, Joanne.
I think sometimes in groups, if you have people who exceed in humility, they have excellent ideas, but they won't speak up. They're a little too humble or too quiet. Maybe they don't think their idea is deserving of being heard. I think it's important to recognize different personalities and try to draw those people out with their ideas.
Right. And one leadership tool, I guess you would call it, is calling on people. So sometimes people won't step forward or raise their hand, but they will if you ask them if they have any input. So that's a good point, Joanne. Tana?
Creativity. Sometimes you can be a little too creative that it scares people away because it's just something that is out of their wheelhouse to be comfortable and have fun or do things differently.
Right. And how many of us have tried a fundraiser that scared us because it was something new and different? And as long as you have it organized, we talked about chaos earlier. It's important to allow people to be creative. We had one where we did a sip and sample, I guess it was called, where we had wine and like some little appetizers, and we were all terrified because we'd never done it before. We made more money at that than we ever had. So it was, I was kind of like, hey, what else can we do that's crazy and something different? So sometimes it's kind of what Judi said before, where if you take it to an extreme, then it becomes a bad thing. Whereas if you're kind of normal and looking at it as a way to, you're looking at the pros and cons of everything before you act, then you can go down the middle road instead of being overproductive or underproductive and forgetting about what's important to you. And last one is Amory. Was that your name? I can't read the whole thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Mine would be diversity. Because like right now, I feel that if we put too much emphasis on a group, then the other group feels left out, kind of like when we discuss trying to get young members, then it's like we aren't showing value to the older members.
Right. It's a good point. I think a lot of us used to recognize like first time attendees at events and celebrate like the newness of people. And then we realized that was happening. And so we've also started celebrating our seasoned members, like how many have been a member for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and kind of balance that a little bit. So there's usually an easy little balancer. If you feel like you're going too far in one direction, just a couple of words of thank you really appeases a lot of people. It's amazing with your communication style, how you can make that kind of adaptation, I guess is the point I'm looking for. So Judi, back to you.
Yeah, I just want to ask about teamwork. Does anyone feel like teamwork could be abused? Lana?
Yes. I saw that choice
Yeah.
in hand.
Yeah, I do. I feel like teamwork can be abused because sometimes with teamwork, the cliques happen. And so you have these people that think they're doing all this great stuff and they're working together and supporting each other, but they're leaving other people out. Or everybody thinks that they're doing teamwork, but they also feel like they're being used.
Okay.
Harry?
Sometimes teamwork is used as kind of a cover for not making a decision. So if you have a group of people who are all on a project together and they'll say, well, let's take it back to the group before we decide. And sometimes it can paralyze people. So that's more like group work than teamwork, because teamwork can be effective, but I've seen groups kind of paralyzed because of trying to accommodate everybody.
That's a great point, Carrie, and your point too, Donna. Thank you.
Yeah, so a team represents a unified power, right? And power can be used for anything good or bad. So the example I have is a really great team can work together to embezzle millions of dollars. Well, that's not a good thing. So when we look at this list, I think many of us can identify with the core values on this list. I know I can. They're good, but they're not great unless they're paired with what we call a higher core value, which we're going to look at next. So these are the highest ones. There are only 4. So these have been tested over time. So if you can go back to your examples and you think, if you pair teamwork with integrity, for example, if you pair creativity with integrity, it adds a whole new element to it, right? So it's kind of looking for this pairing that can really make these core values greater and stronger. So let's talk about each of these individually for just a moment. So integrity. Integrity is acting for what is right. It's discerning right from wrong, and it's also acting for what is right regardless of the risk to yourself. And courage, which we've already talked about quite a bit, and we'll talk about more. Courage is the mental and moral strength to persevere, to withstand danger, to face fear, to work through difficulty. It kind of represents integrity at its highest level, because it's willing to face fear. It converts integrity into habit, and it gives enduring power and usefulness to leadership. Commitment represents your willingness to give your time and energy to a worthy cause. And character is the result of sustained integrity and courage. A person with character has demonstrated consistently over time courage and commitment and integrity. So character really is the most challenging of these, because it takes a lifetime to fulfill. We're constantly developing our character. And people talk about character, it's who do you show yourself to be consistently, time and time and time and time again. So I said I would come back to these seroptimist core values. So in light of our discussion, albeit brief, on low, medium, and high core values, I want to just ask, how do these seroptimist core values resonate with you?
I'll say Judi and I had a little conversation about these after we reviewed, low values, middle values, high values. And none of these are actually in any of the lists we were able to find. So we kind of had a question on, are these truly core values? Or are they behaviors or interests that we are trying to focus on, and what's the difference? So it's kind of a hard discussion to have. And what are your thoughts? Chris?
These seem more mission focused and just broken down into what seroptimus is, adapting them into using the words core values, equating them to what we just discussed. I don't see that in here. However, I think it's just more supporting their mission.
Yeah, Chris, I agree. These seem more like goals to me. I mean, they definitely align with the mission. There's no doubt we can see that connection. But do they speak to collectively as seroptimist how our organization acts in the world? I don't know.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's their goals. Absolutely, the goals.
Yeah.
Donna, your input?
I think these core values sometimes frighten some of our members because they have a lack of understanding of what they actually are. They mean they I feel personalized by all of this because of where I came from and why I'm in Super Optimist. And plus the job that I had, I've been in public health for over 20 years, working with, women and girls, that type of thing. But I mean, a lot of it is politicized. So it's kind of having an understanding of what it really is. But if you actually read the definition of each one, they're not that scary. I mean, it's basically what we really want to do. And I understand the goals, but I understand the core values as well. It resonates with me because I was one of these girls. And I want to give that power and strength and courage to other girls and women, not just girls, but women.
Thank you, Donna. Gail? You're muted, Gail. There you go.
It's hard because we're talking about low, middle, and high core values, and we're asking, like, do you recognize these? What do you think of these? And now we're looking at this federation's core values. It's an organization, it's not a person, and that's a little harder. I have to agree with Donna that some of this might put people off. Some people don't understand gender equality. Is that feminism? Some people don't like that word. But empowerment is clear, education is clear, diversity and fellowship is getting a lot of bad press right now. But it's what I understood from our conference before the last one with Michelle Burnett is it's old people, it's young people, it's people of color, it's people who are white, it's people who came from the wrong side of the tracks and now they are like in upper echelons of a corporation. That's diversity, but I don't know that people really understand that. And maybe it needs to be rephrased.
Yeah, that's a good point, Gail, to point out that these might be organizational as opposed to personal values. And if you look at it that way, still a little confusing to me anyway. So, Linda.
Well, my thought was that the best way to achieve these core values for Seroptimist do seem like they're related to a company rather than, an organization. But the way to best achieve these is by having the higher core values to try to approach each of those. So maybe kind of looking at it that way.
That's a great point. Thanks, Linda. Joanne? Oh, you're muted, Joanne.
I was just going to say what Linda just said. I think the core values, the SIA core values, can be looked at more as goals, but in order to reach them, you need those high core values. Without those high core values, those SIA core values will never be achieved. So
thank you.
Just
good point. And last, Carrie.
Yeah, to Gil and Linda's point, I agree that these organizational values can be connected directly to personal values of compassion or respect or honor. I think that integrity fits into all of these. So I think, to Gail's point, these are organizational values, which will reflect the personal values of the people in the organization. So I think there's something in all of those highest personal values in each of these organizational values.
Thank you. Very good points. Back to you, Judi.
Okay, so Penny mentioned earlier, where I was going to bring this up about somebody mute themselves. The code of conduct. And so that's getting close. It's not quite rolled out yet, but it's getting very close. So the purpose of the code of conduct, I'm just going to say, this is SIA's words. They're intended to promote a culture of respect, integrity, and accountability among all members. So my question is, do the words respect, integrity, and accountability sound more like core values for SIA than these 4 listed here? Because I think they do. So I think it's going in the right direction. All right, I'm going to circle back now to the river of fear, which is where we started. So in light of the core values exercise that we just did very quickly, we can see that the individuals on the left side have these good, solid middle core values, where those on the other side of the river also have the high core values, and we can add integrity to that list. So the river, what's in between, it deals with our feelings, very much about our feelings and these touchy-feely concepts. But our feelings is strong enough to act as a barrier that separates good from great and courageous from not as courageous, and hesitant from bold. So remember, courage is a choice. It's your choice to confront fear, pain, danger, or intimidation for the worthy goal. And when you choose courage, you're choosing to be a bold and great leader. Okay, next I'm going to play a short video.
What does courage look like? Can you climb it? Can you touch it or taste it? How do you define it? How do you face it? Does it take you on a journey, like a trip through winter snow? Is it something that just happens, or you innately know? Does it flow like a waterfall? Does it float like fog or burn like a flame? Can it be passed down from generation to generation? Can it be lost? Can it be reclaimed? Courage, the ability to overcome obstacles even in the face of fear. Courage, the determination to move forward even when defeat might look near. Courage, the ability to believe the truth of God in the face of Satan's doubt. Courage, the will to keep going even in the darkest times, because you have the faith that eventually you will make it out.
Okay, that was just a more poetic way of what we've been talking about. So just to kind of wrap this up, this discussion this morning was really just intended to pique your interest and give you hopefully a desire to dive into this further throughout the year. I really want us to be prepared to act courageously. We're all facing points of decision in our clubs and in other areas of our lives. And I know that courage is something we can work on, we can learn, and we can practice. So at our district meetings in October, we're going to do a workshop on courageous communication, which I believe is very much at the heart of what we need to talk about. I mean, have you ever thought about why it's so hard to have a difficult conversation with someone? Why it's easier to gossip with a friend or another club member rather than address someone you've had a conflict with directly? Do you think that people that you maybe gossip with wonders if you're talking about her to someone else as well? If you're going to share a challenge with someone, you should also share a solution. And if you're aware of a challenge, you should be working to create a solution. Because courageous and committed leaders will always lead with character and will always be discreet. The rest of the topics we're going to cover virtually as we have in the past. They're intended to build on each other. They will be useful if you do them in order, but if you can't, that's okay too, because as in previous years, all of these workshops will be recorded and available for you to review on your own time. So I hope we're doing courageous communication at district meetings because that to me is the most important thing for us to talk about. And we obviously will have attention of the most people collectively at our three district meetings. So I hope you're excited about this journey. I know I am. I hope you're committed to learning. Some of this is really tough and tough stuff. And I just believe that that's where we are in our clubs and in our region at this time is having the skills and the ability to really tackle the hard situations that we're facing. I think this will ultimately be freeing for us. It will give us greater clarity and a greater ability to focus on our big goal, which is reaching 500,000 women and girls, which is really more important than focusing on the pettiness and the bickering and the gossip and things that are happening in our clubs. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm also going to want to stop recording, but I don't know how. There we go.